Interview in the series of interviews of The Rise of the Modern GC. I'm Donna Rosenberg from Jameson Legal, and I am Director and Head of Inhouse for UK and Europe. Jameson Legal, we are an international recruitment company, and we recruit to legal company secretary, risk and compliance positions for law firms, professional services, industry and commerce. We have offices in London, Abu Dhabi, Hong Kong and Singapore. I'm here today with Alexia Tomazos from Outbrain. Alexia is Head of Legal and Business Affairs at Outbrain. She trained as a lawyer in South Africa and then went in-house in 2015 when she came to London, also qualifying as a solicitor in England and Wales. Outbrain are a leading recommendation platform for open web. Thanks for joining us today, Alexia. It's really great to have you here. We'd love to hear a little bit more about yourself.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me. First off, and you're correct. I started off I qualified as a lawyer in South Africa. You can probably hear from my South African accent; it's pretty obvious. I actually first tried to apply for architecture and decided that I didn't get in, and then thought, okay, I'll do a Bachelor of Arts, and started taking some law courses, and during that time realized, I actually love the law and I want to go on further to become a lawyer. And then once I qualified at the University of Cape Town, I got articles, which is the equivalent of traineeship at the DLA Piper South African affiliate called Cliff Decker Hofmeyr. So I did my traineeship there for 2 years, and during that time realized that I wanted to come to London. I thought I'd come to London for a year, have a bit of an adventure, see kind of the big wide world, and then realized, I think quite quickly, probably as soon as I stepped foot in London, that this was the place for me. I absolutely loved it, and I was committed to kind of being in London long term. So what that meant for me from a career perspective was, qualifying to be a lawyer in the UK, as well as being a lawyer in South Africa. And to find an in-house position, I knew that I wanted to move in-house. And so I originally joined in the General Counsel's office as a legal counsel focused on commercial contracts at a bank. During that time, had a kind of a great broad experience. I was on their kind of GDPR implementation project. I also qualified to be a yoga teacher in and amongst that. And then decided to go into kind of the tech space, and very naively didn't really know what tech was, but knew that I definitely wanted to be in that space. And thought it was happening and it was a great place to be, and very luckily fell into ad tech, which I, subsequently came to love and found very fulfilling and interesting. And so have been, went to Outbrain as their European legal counsel, did my privacy qualification, CIPPE, while I was there, because I was also running their privacy program and also everything to do with their European offices, which I think were about kind of 8 at the time. And then was lucky enough to have an opportunity to go to LoopMe, which is an AI-driven ad tech business, as well as their general counsel. So had a very broad kind of global experience as their general counsel. But then Outbrain, the pull of Outbrain and what an incredible organization it is was too strong, and they asked me to come back as their head of legal and business affairs, and so that's where I currently am. I also a very broad global role, and doing everything that has kind of a legal aspect. So that's where I currently am, and I've been in the UK for 6 years as an in-house lawyer. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, I'm used to the South African accent because I'm married to one. So,
well, happy for you, Donna.
Yeah. So what was it when we first connected and we started to talk about the subject of the rise of the modern GC? What connected you to that subject and prompted you to participate in the interviews?
Yeah, to be honest, I think that the legal landscape is changing. I think that especially, the way that COVID has impacted the way of working, you need to be, this whole concept of being a modern GC is a very relevant one. We have to be, the traditional old way of thinking of lawyers as just being a pure kind of support function has really changed. And we need to start, bringing more value as a legal team. and not just kind of being contract pushers. And I think that the way that, legal has been inherently viewed is starting to change. There's a lot more technology around, legal tools. There's a lot more, the way that the legal team is expected to work is very different. And I think that this whole idea of, being a modern GC is very relevant and very true in the current climate.
Great, fantastic. So just going back to looking at your in-house career and what that presented for you, is there anything in particular that sort of triggered you wanting to move in-house?
Yeah, I mean, as I said, I worked in a law firm during my traineeship, and I think what I realized was that being in a law firm, you get exposure to kind of discrete pieces of work, but you don't necessarily have the full picture from the end to end of what the business requires. You're acting for a client on a certain piece of work, but you don't have the context of the wider project. And when I was at this, at my law firm, I was pulled into a few projects where we were involved from end to end, and I realized that was for me the most exciting part. And I think my approach to being a lawyer has always been I'd like to be very pragmatic, very commercial, very business orientated. And in order to fulfill that, I needed to be closer to the business. And I enjoyed that element of getting a full idea of, what the business's priorities are, how to go from something from start to finish, and how to have a real kind of impact from a legal perspective. And so I very much decided when I was, once I'd finished my traineeship, I definitely wanted to go in-house. I wanted to be closer to the business elements and to be a lawyer that kind of understood that, and for that to kind of permeate in the way that I approach things.
Definitely. There's a lot of people that come to me and ask the question around moving out of private practice too soon. And I don't think there's any defined answer to that, because some people's pool is, larger at that point in time than it is to somebody else's. So I definitely wanted to highlight the fact that sometimes it's instinctive. It's a natural next step of events for some, rather than staying in private practice for a designed, period of time and waiting to move at a later date.
Yeah.
How important, and this probably leads into this, how important is it to have a future roadmap when you're considering a career in-house? How important was it for you?
Well, I think just as you mentioned, I never had, and to be very transparent, I never had a very clear roadmap of I needed to be in a law firm for X amount of time. I then needed to be in this position. I think it's always good, it's always, now in hindsight, I could see kind of how my roadmap had developed, and it definitely wasn't on, a certain period of time being somewhere. I think what I always had clear in my mind was where I wanted to be, and I wanted to be kind of in a general counsel, head of legal position, and that was kind of my guiding star. And so everything that I did was take the opportunities which took me closer to that. And so, if I could give advice to someone now, and obviously again with hindsight, there's definitely I didn't have all the answers, so I don't want to put anyone under pressure to feel like they should, but I think it helps to have a clear understanding of what industry you want to be in. It helps, I think, to define who you are in the ecosystem, to say, I'm a lawyer within this specific space, and it helps you hone your skills. And I think most importantly is understand where you want to go, and don't have tunnel vision to the opportunities that present themselves that could take you towards that step. That, as you were saying, someone saying, how long do I need to be kind of in-house? I mean, in a law firm before I go in-house, I wouldn't say that's the kind of right way to thinking. It's, does this serve, the path that I want to be on, and the place that I want to be.
Perfect, thank you. When recruiting besides skills, what other qualities do you feel are equally important? And once hired, how have you nurtured the talent in others? And I think we're alluding to more of the softer skills here.
Yeah, so I mean, it's probably going to sound, everyone's probably going to say these things, but for me, it's really important to have someone that's ambitious and shows initiative. And I think it's a difficult one to establish in an interview, because everyone has their prepped answer of, the times that they've shown initiative. So my approach is always to, try and ask fewer questions, but get a more in-depth conversation around those questions, because the softer skills start to present themselves. And I think, ambition and initiative are something that mean that someone's going to come into an organization and truly take responsibility and ownership of their role. And, part of the next piece of your question is around, how do I nurture talent? I think, of course, there's the ability, you as a team lead need to be making sure that your team are skilled enough and to provide them with the right skill sets for their day-to-day role. But I think over and above that, it's to really give people true ownership. You often see that a team lead becomes the face of the team, and you don't see the work that's happening behind the scenes with all of the people that are working in that team. And for me, I really want to give people true ownership of their role. And that means let them be, making sure that they're the face of everything that they do, making sure that they're amplified when they have ownership and they've achieved, and also to take responsibility if things don't necessarily go the way. It's an important part of being an in-house lawyer, is to have your voice and for people to know that you own something. Mm-hmm. And I think that's why, the two go hand in hand, having someone that takes initiative and is ambitious, because people come in and they want to have that true ownership of their role. I think it's a very important thing to amplify.
And it's great because interviews are a two-way street, definitely, and it's an opportunity for you to get to know your manager better as well, if not in the first stages, but in the latter stages of interviewing. So it's really important that you feel that they explore all that you have to offer, because I think that then lets you know whether they have the right skill set to manage you, particularly because, a lot of people do go in-house and stub their toe initially because they get more caught up in the opportunity rather than overall what that opportunity will present for them and how their own talent will be nurtured.
Yeah.
So going on to risk, with respect to risk, what do you feel is key to really understanding this?
I'm probably going to sound like a broken record, but, I think it's understanding, what the business truly means and what it really needs. I think having a very, very good understanding of the business and its trajectory and what is important to it and its stakeholders helps you to identify risk, to have ongoing discussions with stakeholders about what's important, what isn't important. It helps you to identify risk in those conversations, but then to also understand where you need to kind of prioritize. And, risk is not only risk for things that you identify that could be a problem potentially for the business, but risk is also under-resourcing in terms of your team's time, making risk in terms of I haven't provided sufficient resource to something which is actually probably going to be a huge priority from a business perspective. So I think it's understanding that risk is not just a legal risk that you identify for the business, but it's also the risk of not making sure that your team is at the forefront of what needs to be done and filling the gaps.
Great, thank you. So how important is legal to the development and growth of a company?
Obviously, I'm going to say it's very important. But, I think it goes back to what I said earlier. Legal is, I think, a cornerstone of the business. It's the way that I think we need to start changing the way that we think about legal, is that it's not just a support function. And where it becomes very important to the business is when you look at how you can add value in a way that's not just executing a contract. It's, upskilling the business teams, making sure that you're providing trainings, thinking of efficiencies and applying it. And I think when you start to think in that way, it becomes an even more important function, and it's seen as a real value add, as opposed to just kind of a support function in the background that makes sure that contracts are signed.
Yeah. And what changes have you seen in the legal industry, and what over impact have these changes had?
I think the main thing that I've really seen is like this move towards legal tech and implementing legal tech. And the feeling I get is that initially people were quite scared of this was it going to replace a lawyer and having, you know, an in-house legal team because suddenly there's a tool that can check contracts for you? I think the feeling now is that that's not going to be the case. There's still a place for lawyers and legal tech, you know, working alongside lawyers. And I think that there's definitely been a move towards these technologies, and there's been a real kind of value add in having these technologies within the business, and, you know, automating contracts, for example, having kind of central repositories. It means that you become a much more efficient team, but it also enhances kind of the data that you have and the understanding of what you do as a team and the output that you give to the business.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Alexia, for all of that information and insight. It's very much appreciated. At this point in time, if anybody has any additional questions they'd like to ask either myself or you, please get in contact with me via my email address. Equally, if you're watching this video and you're a head of legal, associate general counsel or general counsel and you'd like to get involved, please reach out. I'd be delighted to share some information with you. Again, thank you very much for your time. Is there anything else that you would like to add?
No, thank you so much. It was a real pleasure speaking to you.
Yeah, pleasure collaborating with you on this as well. Please look out for some more interviews. We'll be rolling them out over the course of the next couple of months. And in the meantime, take care and stay safe.
Bye-bye.